The atrocious war in Syria is dragging on. Turkey is teetering. There's war in Yemen. The Middle East is in turmoil again. To discuss the region, we're now joined by the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, Adel al-Jubeir. Welcome to Euronews.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Foreign Minister, the world was used to a very cautious Saudi foreign policy for decades. Now we see your country taking a much bolder stance with direct intervention in Yemen, with a clear positioning on Iran, Syria, the fight against the so-called Islamic State, also al-Qaeda, President Bashar al-Assad. Is this the Saudi Arabia the world better get used to?
We saw a vacuum, and the vacuum had to be filled. We saw a lack of leadership, and there had to be leadership. And so we worked with our allies, and we stepped into the vacuum in order to protect our interests. We had a militia that's radical, that's allied with Iran and Hezbollah, taking over Yemen, and in possession of ballistic missiles, and an air force that became a dire threat to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries. Somebody had to do something about it, so we stepped in. In terms of Iran, we said enough is enough. 35 years of aggression by Iran towards the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and its allies is enough. We will not tolerate this. With regard to Syria, our objective is to support the moderate opposition and bring about a change in the system there.
When you say a vacuum, do you intend that there is weakness of US presence in the region now?
Not necessarily. We have been watching the Houthi takeover of Yemen very, very slowly over the past 7, 8, 9 years. Nobody was willing to confront it, so we had to. We have been watching the slaughter of the innocents in Syria for years, and nobody was doing anything about it, so we had to do something.
An attempted coup in Turkey brought further instability to the region. How do you assess the role of Turkey as a foreign policy player in the aftermath of this coup?
The unfortunate incident, the attempted coup in Turkey, which failed, I don't believe will have a lasting impact on Turkey's standing or Turkey's well-being.
Still, in Western countries, there's growing fear that Turkey might go a very authoritarian way. US Foreign Secretary of State John Kerry hinted that NATO membership could be in jeopardy of Turkey. Do you fear this is weakening the fight against the so-called Islamic State?
I don't believe so. Turkey is a democracy. The will of the Turkish people will be implemented. Turkey has to be allowed to take the steps necessary to ensure its security. Nobody questioned the United States when it took thousands of people and put them in Guantanamo in Cuba. Nobody.
You have said several times that you're very confident that President Bashar al-Assad will end up leaving. How confident are you now, seeing the weakness of some regional players, but also seeing the situation on the ground? Aleppo is on the verge of falling into the hands of the Syrian army.
At the end of the day, there will be a new Syria without Bashar al-Assad. It's a question of timing. Will it be achieved through a political process that can bring it about faster and more smoothly? Or will it be done through a military process which will take longer, cost more in terms of death and destruction and in terms of blood and treasure?
Now, the political process seems stuck, so this might go the military way. Which way do you see more realistic?
We will support the moderate Syrian opposition militarily, as if there is no political process, and we will support the political process as if there is no military process.
How far are you prepared to go in terms of military support?
We have a group of countries that are providing support to the moderate opposition. We agree on which groups should receive that support and when and how, and we've always been urging to provide them with more robust equipment so they can take on Bashar al-Assad.
Would Saudi Arabia send boots on the ground?
We are prepared to send special forces into Syria as part of the international coalition to fight Daesh.
When you speak about the so-called Islamic State, you rather use the Arabic acronym Daesh. I guess that is no coincidence.
Because
what is Daesh for you? Is it Islamic? Is it state?
It is neither Islamic nor is it a state. It is a collection of criminals, psychopaths, perverts. This has nothing to do with Islam. Daesh to Islam is like the KKK in America is to Christianity. Nothing to do with it. Every religion has its outliers. Every religion has its fanatics, but they do not reflect the religion. And for Daesh to even think that it is part of a faith is outrageous.
if it's a gang of psychopaths, how can they be able to run not a country but a geographical area for such a long time and be militarily such a huge problem?
There are many examples in history of psychopaths who have done unbelievable things. Adolf Hitler was a psychopath.
It's almost a year ago that the nuclear deal with Iran was signed. Saudi Arabia was very skeptical. Fast forward 1 year, how do you assess the situation now?
We said that any deal that prevents Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, that has a robust and intrusive inspection mechanism, and that has provisions for restoring the sanctions should Iran violate the terms, is one we would welcome. The concerns we had, and we still have to do with the funds that Iran will have access to. What we see is continued Iranian engagement in hostile activities, in supporting Hezbollah in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, and in trying to supply weapons to the Houthis. So I think the jury is still out on whether this is, Iran has been, if there's a change in Iran's behavior or not, but we don't really see any.
If you had a grounded suspicion that Iran would not stick to the terms of the deal, would Saudi Arabia consider acquiring nuclear weapons?
Saudi Arabia will do whatever it takes to protect our people and our country. In terms of how we do it or by which means we do it, this is not something that we would be announcing, certainly not on television.
How are Saudi-Israeli relations developing in the aftermath of the nuclear deal?
We have no relations with Israel.
No contacts, no back channels?
No.
Saudi Arabia is often accused to be implicitly responsible for Islamic terrorism. The argumentation line goes, Arabia is financing mosques all over the world, training imams. These imams preach a very conservative version of Islam, which then is unwillingly, but forms the grounding breed for terrorism. What do you answer to this?
Why would we support an ideology whose objective it is to kill us? We are the target of these extremists. They want access to Mecca and Medina. And so we have suffered in terms of terrorist attacks. We have suffered in terms of loss of our security personnel in trying to defend the innocent. We are on the forefront of fighting extremism and terrorism, not only in Saudi Arabia, but in the region and in the world. And so for somebody to say the Saudis are funding extremism or their ideology is funding extremism is preposterous. We are going after the men, the money, and the mindset that is behind this. We will not tolerate extremism. If you have a problem in a particular town in your country, shut down the center. Don't blame others. If it happens in your country, it's your fault.
Foreign Minister, thank you very much for this interview.
Appreciate it. Thank you.